Well, welcome to another episode of Chestnut Checkers. I am Keith Riddle here with my co-host Jordan Tampien, as always. And today's guest is Jim Orcutt. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing good.
I got you right when you were drinking water there.
Thanks for the invite, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming down. We've already been talking lots of real estate things. So.
Yeah. Half the stuff we missed in the recording. That's right.
Yeah, we can go all day, right, on real estate. All day.
I know. And well, let's go.
Yeah.
It is funny. We haven't actually, as much real estate as we do, we haven't had a podcast that really dove into real estate. Like Anton was market conditions and maybe ADUs in the back, DADUs in the back, but we haven't actually really done a full like dive into real estate one.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because I just get sick of talking about it.
Let's be honest, it probably is.
Or if no one else is interested, I'm not sure.
Misery loves company. Right. Let's go.
But Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself to get our viewers up to speed here. So we talked a little bit earlier. Pseudo Spokane guy, kind of a Spokane guy.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically raised in Spokane. You know, I was born in Sandpoint, raised in Spokane. You know, just public school kid. Went Linwood, went Sauk, went North Central. Went out to Eastern Washington. You know, kind of got on the 5-year plan. Didn't really know exactly what I was going to get my degree in initially. Went and worked on a construction crew for a little bit. Took some time off. Came back. Ultimately, got my degree in finance. Got my minor in econ. And like I said earlier, you know, I was kind of bummed around Spokane a little bit looking for some gainful employment. Really didn't see much. So I had a couple good friends that were living in Seattle. So made the trek over to Seattle and kind of got started over there.
How long were you in Seattle?
About 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you consider yourself a Seattleite at that point? 5 years in?
Well, it's funny, you know, because when my wife came behind me, I went over by myself initially, was literally living in a closet because like no money. They didn't have a room. The guy said, hey, you can rent this closet. So I was literally living in a closet. I went and bought a styrofoam mattress and I was living in this closet. But then it wasn't too long after that, you know, I was able to find a spot for my wife, my soon-to-be wife and I. And when we first were in Seattle, we just loved it. You know, it was great. You know, it was just something different. Spokane was good, but you could just feel the vibe and the energy. Microsoft was taking off. Boeing was doing pretty good.
This is the 90s?
This was like right at the 90s,
okay.
Late 80s, 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we just got going over there. You know, it started, I mean, had no idea what I was going to do, right? Yeah. So I'm looking in the paper, got my finance degree. I thought I might get into banking or something like that. I really was thinking more corporately than kind of the entrepreneur type stuff. And so I answered this ad, and I don't know how much you want to hear about this. But
sure.
It's good. I answered this ad. It just said, it said WC Control Sales. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I just called. And so this lady, she said, hey, you sound good. Come on and talk to me. So I go out and talk to her. And so she's running a collection agency. Like it's a recovery business, right? And we all have bad debt. So she's like, no, I'm looking for a salesperson to go out and like really hustle and bring the accounts in. And I'm thinking like, hey.
Is that sales though? Or is that like, did you have to carry a crowbar with you? Or was that like?
No, you're probably bringing in the corporate account, like when the lender.
Oh, got it.
So then, hey, they defaulted. That's what I assume.
Well,
or you were busting kneecaps.
I mean, so she basically just sent me loose. So I'm like, I'm ending up like, no, but I started calling property management, grocery stores. I'm literally going door to door.
Gotcha.
And you wouldn't believe how many people just had a couple bad checks in the back room that they'd give to me. They'd sign a little agreement that says if we collect, we keep 50%, you get 50%. Mm-hmm. But no, we had the boiler room, man. We had like 4 guys that were the collectors. Mm-hmm. All I did was bring in the accounts. Yeah. And then the collectors started leaning on people, you know, however they'd get the money. But that job lasted.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. But what was interesting, like when I started, she said, hey, you'll get 3% of whatever you bring in. And, you know, actually I started doing pretty good, bringing in quite a bit, like literally bringing in boxes of bad checks from a few grocery stores, a few property. And all of a sudden she goes, hey, man, I can't give you 3% anymore. We got to cut it to 1.5. And I'm sitting there going, that ain't going to cut it, man. Like we had, and it was a handshake though. Yeah. So I was a little naive thinking, oh, I'm just going to get my 3%. She gave me my little base, gave me a little car allowance. And I literally told her right then, I said, if it's 1.5, I'm walking out the door. And we had kind of this little stare down. I still remember it. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. And I just said, hey, you've said enough. So I turned and just walked out the door. And so from that point, I just went back and told my wife, hey, I think I just lost my job.
Quit, lost, fired. I don't know.
So I drive back, and we're, and so I started then going back to Anthony's home port to bartend, which was right in front of where we were living, because I was bartending in college.
Yeah.
So it's good bartender. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to fill in the gap. I'll go bartend. And so this is really where my life changed. It's like in your life, sometimes you meet somebody unique, just that chance meeting. So we're living in this little 4-unit condo complex. And I ended up buying the unit we were in. It was my first little purchase. Didn't really know what I was doing, but we had enough money. We got it done. So I'm out there washing my car in the morning, just bedhead, shorts, no shirt, no nothing. Guy rolls up in like a 450 SL Mercedes. Guys just put together like straight Hollywood. And he gets out of his car. He's kind of looking at the building. He's looking at me, and he's like, "Hey, are you the guy that bought this unit down here?" I'm like, "Yeah." So he goes, "Well," and he's so I'm Neil Foreman. I own 2 of the 4 units here. So I just introduced myself. It's like, okay, whatever. So I had a pretty good little discussion with him. But then he's like, "Hey, what do you do? Like, what's your job? Like, what do you do?" And I said, "Well," so I gave him the quick little story, what's going on. He's like, "You need to go meet my brother, because my brother's got a financial services company in Bellevue, downtown Bellevue, and I think you'd be a guy he'd like to meet." So I had my Seahawk gear on. I used to work for the Seahawks in the summer, so he started talking about the Seahawks, and he was a big Seahawk fan. So anyway, I go down to meet his brother, Frank. Turns out, Frank's one of this is the guy that I met that literally changed my life, because it was just like, you talk about mentors or guys that you can really follow their lead. Because sometimes, man, it's like, don't reinvent the wheel. Just find somebody successful and let's just follow that. So I went and met with Frank, and he was like the most dynamic guy I'd ever met. Just like found out, just super successful. Not at the original meeting, but just that he was one of the top producers in the country for CNA, American Express, selling all kinds of financial services, insurance, annuities, this and that. So Frank hired me, and then he kind of took me under his wing and just turned out to be this great mentor. But what I found out was Frank and Neil, who own this company, were taking they make a bunch of money, and where do they invest their money?
Real estate.
Thank you. Yeah. And so they were like, we buy everything west of 405, because if you're familiar with Seattle, Bellevue, Kirkland.
Yep.
They were totally east side guys, Bellevue, Kirkland. So basically from downtown Bellevue up to Kirkland, like Juanita area, we buy west of 405, we just buy condos, because we don't want to deal with the yard work. We don't want to deal with any of that. So they had a bunch of real estate. So as I started working with Frank, got to be, making some pretty good money. And so then he started mentoring me a little bit on the investment side. And so the first thing I ever bought, I bought this little condo behind Evergreen Medical Center. Back then you could buy VA repos for $0 down, even investors.
Yeah, because you could assume the note, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I had no money, I had literally still basically no money. But the first deal I bought, it was this little condo behind the hospital. There was $1,600 down, take it over. And it was basically just paint and carpet, rent it out. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I got it started, kind of on the real estate side. Not sure, honestly, would I ever even done it if I wouldn't have met these guys, because real estate was never really on my radar. So just kind of.
It's funny because I hear you say this, and when I first started buying houses, I didn't have any money either, right? Mm-hmm. But I bought probably my first 5 or 10 properties I bought on lease option purchases.
Yeah.
And it was just because I listened to some literally book on tape, Rich Dad, Poor Dad seminar thing, and they were talking about owner financing and lease options. And so I was like, that lease option thing sounds kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But when we interview or when I talk to real estate investors, they all have a similar story about getting in. And typically that's part of the story. Mm-hmm. It's they found a way to get into the market, whether it was $0 down or with little money. But they start, and I feel like sometimes it sends the wrong message, or it sends a confusing message to people where they're like, oh, well, that worked for Jim because I just heard him say he basically had the $0 down thing available. Well, that's not available anymore, so it won't work for me. Or I hear Keith talking, and it's you just got to find a way.
Correct.
Right? I think that's the important thing is a lot of times people think if they're going to get into real estate investing, it's I got to save 20% down. Yep. The average house price is $400,000, so I can't invest in anything unless I have $80,000. I'll never have $80,000, so I'm just never going to be a real estate investor. And it's no, there's so many creative ways to get into but you have to. So I guess the desire has to be there for one, and then number two is you just got to figure out what the market of the moment is on those creative tactics, right?
Well said.
And I don't know. how to convey that other than just how I just did to people of like, you just got to find that way in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think too many times they start with money. And I think that all I'd ever impress on is money is the very last thing. It's risk, tolerance, location, what you can handle.
Totally.
And then find the deal.
Totally.
The money's there, and that's what I started really, because most of mine, I bet 6 of my first 10 were owner finance. Then I go sit down with Jim. Jim has a building he doesn't really want. Jordan's excited about doing it, but I have no money.
Yeah.
But he knows, and so you just kind of work through those pieces. It's just, but everybody starts with the money piece.
Yeah,
Which
no,
is
you're
the
totally
greatest
right.
one, right?
And even I did at a young age, in the sense of like I did, but I would find dilapidated properties or properties that like you're talking about where like somebody was just fed up with them or had them too long, and maybe they had deferred maintenance and they just were, crummy landlords or whatever. But like one of the first ones I bought was a triplex. It was run down as heck. It was built in the late 1800s. And the owners were just staying. And it was like, a husband that worked construction mostly, and a wife that kind of managed their proproperties, but they already had a portfolio that was bigger than they could manage. And you could just see the defeat in their eyes, right? They're like, "We'll give it to you if you just have like $5,000,
Just take it.
But I was young enough where I was like, I didn't have the money, like big down money, but I was like, I could go to Home Depot or Lowe's and I could buy a toilet or a refrigerator, the rehab money. So you just have to find that in. But like you're saying, most people start with the money. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest misnomer is like, and I used to say that to young agents when they were residential agents, when they were getting the business, was like, you're always trying to find a client who can I sell or, buy or sell a house for. I was like, you're better off going to find a deal. Yeah. Because then you'll find a client real quick. Yeah, right. Sure. And I think that's how I got into real estate investing was I was selling a lot of houses to investors initially. Yes. And it's because of my angle. I was young, I was in my mid 20s. Yeah. And so a lot of my friends and family didn't have money to buy houses. And so I was like, but investors had money and I just had to hustle a deal. Totally. So I was like, hey, if I go find deals, then investors love me, right? Regardless of how young I look or how green I am, they're like, this kid has a deal. Yeah. Instead of going around to everybody I know going, will you please buy a house from me? Yeah. Yes. I was like, I'm just going to go try and find 3 deals this week.
Perfect.
But a lot of the stories are like yours. I would say mine's the same thing. I wouldn't want to go do real estate. Yeah. It just seemed like the thing other people did. Yeah. And I think too many times we get boxed in on that part of it instead of letting that be open. And I was like, even now I have an AI tool that does the driving for dollars for me. Literally scans Google Street Maps, pulls up the house that the yard isn't done, gives me all the contact information. And I think of all the times.
You've been holding out on me,
I was gonna release it on another one, but you're like, it's just one of those where the information has always been there, just a different way.
Correct.
And I think now what the part that's missing is the getting to know each other. But so I'm gonna let you continue on your journey.
Sorry about the caveat. Backtracking. So what I'm curious about is, so you're buying these little condos in Seattle, but you're in finance at this point?
So I was selling, which, you talk about getting money. Like actually, I'm very fortunate. I started primarily selling home health care, long-term care, Medicare supplements. That's what really cut my teeth. And then I started doing annuities and some, very simple fixed investment type stuff.
So when did you make the transition or the leap into real estate, like full-time as a career?
When I moved back to Spokane. We had our first child. We were kind of contemplating staying in Seattle or coming back to Spokane. My mom was here, my wife's mom was here. We had our first daughter in, I think, 1990. It was 1990.
Nice.
I do remember.
It's good that you remember that.
And just one day I came home and I'm like, is this where we want to raise our family? Do we want to stay in Seattle or do we want to be around?
Sure.
And my wife was she was like, let's go back home. And so I agreed. So we put our house for sale in Kirkland, and literally we did a little ad by owner. I was like, hey, I'm just going to see, because we had a pretty good sized loan on it, didn't have a lot of money. So this little Chinese couple comes and knocks at our door, opens the door, we let them in, and they come walking around our house, and like 5 minutes later, they're like, we want to buy your house. Okay. So then they write like a full price cash offer, and they want us out like in a month. And so I guess we're moving back.
We're moving in a month.
And we had no idea where we were going. But we found a house. We got going pretty quick, and we found a house and just loaded up the U-Haul. I remember driving back. I mean, the pets are climbing on me in the U-Haul. Wife's behind me in the car. But no, we got back to Spokane. And then I got back to Spokane. I was thinking, like, I started doing a little bit of what I was doing in Seattle. But it became pretty clear to me, I just wasn't passionate for it long term. And about that time, I was starting to sell a few of the properties that I'd acquired in Seattle. I think when we moved, I had like 5 or 6 properties that I had kept. I bought them and kept them. And since we moved, I'm like, and we had a nice little run of appreciation there. Microsoft kind of took off. And so the values in real estate were kind of like they went up pretty good for like a 2 or 3 year period. Not crazy, but there was a nice little chunk of equity, you know. And so I got over here and I just started looking around. I happened to just call on an ad that Grant Person, who was, you know, Tomlinson Commercial, he owned it. He was the broker. He listed the 5 Mile mini storage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The one that goes up and down. You know, you drive by and like, how do those doors close?
They don't.
Because
Yeah.
right, they don't.
They don't.
Is that the one that's still up there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. It's still there.
It's still
Behind
there.
like the
By-
boiler room?
Yeah,
or,
right by
like,
boiler room. Yeah.
Is it Brumback over that now?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Does Brumback own that?
Yeah, I don't know about the storage.
Yeah, I
he owns
don't know.
he owns the apartments and the
Apartment.
development.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he owns everything around
Yeah.
it. But I think
I think the storage is separate from
I
it.
mean, yeah, because at the time I think Dick Vandervoort owned it.
It used to be a Titleman's, right?
He did. It wasn't Tidymans, and Tidymans was like
Oh, yeah.
falling off the hill.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so they had to bring. I heard the amount of dirt they had
Oh,
to bring in,
totally.
exfil. Yeah, so.
Yeah, because Tidymans was what they built. Tidymans on was like the fill wasn't really
Yeah.
compacted right or whatever. But anyway, so then so I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to migrate into the investment side. I'll kind of hunt for a job. But then, you know, I met with Grant. And Grant's like, dude, you need to get into real estate. He's just like, you'd be perfect for commercial real estate. So he literally just said, go get your license, and then you're going to come work for me. I was like, oh, okay.
Welcome home. Yeah.
So anyway, so that's what I did. You know, I went and got my license. I started working at Tomlinson Commercial down at 400 South Jefferson. There was a bunch of really good guys down there. But what did become very apparent to me pretty quickly in the commercial arena is the guys that had a lot of horsepower, a lot of net worth, were the guys that owned real estate. I mean, the brokerage component of it was still, you know, it was fluid. Guys were making money. It was good, but the guys who really had the horsepower were the guys that owned property. So it wasn't like a light bulb moment for me, but it just, at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to really focus on both aspects of it. Like, I'm going to do brokerage with a lot of effort. I'm also going to do the investment side with a lot of effort. So
It's so obvious, and yet, I don't know if this is the right term, unintuitive, as I feel like how you say it. Like, as a young person, I remember saying that same thing. Like, it was very obvious to me that the people with the high net worth had real estate, right? Yeah. But it was very unintuitive, and I thought I could just buy some real estate and be rich.
Totally.
I was like, wait,
Yeah.
so you...
That's a good point.
Like,
no.
I'm like, well, if I just buy real estate, I'll be rich, right?
Yeah.
And then you start buying some real estate, and you're like,
fallacy of real estate.
fuck, I got all this real estate, and I'm broke.
Yeah,
What's
dude.
going on here?
That's the opposite.
It's
Yeah.
the long game, my friend.
But
yeah.
it's so like I said, I don't know the better way to put it,
Yeah.
but that is one of those things where
Totally.
you saw
Yeah.
some high net worth people who had real estate.
Totally.
It's easy to make the assumption that
Yeah, I mean, right. Because again, they got the nice pads. You're living on Rockford Bay or where, you know, just guys are rolling in it. But, you know, developers, guys have been in it for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't really looking at any, like, fresh guys that were just getting into the investment game. You know, I was being exposed to guys that had been in it for 20 or 30 years and had a lot of money. And so, I mean, but I was able to do some calculations in my mind pretty quickly, just going, you know, I mean, you just look at, you know, real estate's basically just math, right? You're going, okay, principal, buy down, hopefully a little appreciation, a little cash flow, little tax. You can start like understanding the value of the real estate game, of owning it. So I just started thinking like I got to at least acquire like one a year. You know, I had some, once I started like getting into a few things, you know, I bought like a couple, the first building I bought in Spokane, I bought an 8-unit out on 8th Avenue off Dishman Micah. You know, it was just 2 little fourplexes side by side. So when I migrated from Seattle to Spokane, I started buying a few small multifamilies because I was kind of conditioned for residential investment property. So I bought a couple of those, bought an 8-unit on the South Hill, bought a fourplex on the South Hill, bought a handful of these small multifamily properties. And so...
Were you liquidating your condos in Seattle?
Yes.
To try
Yes.
to,
Yeah, I basically 1031 4 or 5 times out of Seattle, and in each case I had about $30,000 or $40,000.
Yep.
20,000, 30, maybe 40, and used that to effectively then acquire some small multifamily around Spokane.
So that was just price. Excuse me. Was that just price then? I have X to spend, so I like this, or was it the 8 you liked the model of buying an 8
No,
unit?
good question. The 8-unit that I saw had an FHA assumable loan, and I had about the exact amount of money to get me there. And so I honestly didn't really know. The fourplex that I bought at 1420 South Grand was one of the first ones too. It was a seller finance deal, Jordan, and it was like they wanted like 20 grand down, and I was selling this little, you know, condo, I think, for that one, and I had about 20 grand in equity. So it just seamlessly flowed into that.
Makes sense.
Did you, another question here, did you kind of hit the ground running in commercial real estate? Were you making good active income at the time?
Yeah.
Was that an easy transition for you?
It was.
I feel like commercial real estate's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, but you know what?
You don't meet a lot of people that just land there and start killing it.
Well, here's what I would say. I've always had pretty good work habits. And so when I got there, I got up to it pretty quick as far as what I was doing, as far as prospecting for people. I found that a lot of people were not active in the multifamily sector. So there was a lot of low-hanging fruit. The very first call I made, I got 2 listings from.
Yeah.
It was a duplex and a fourplex. And so I started prospecting a minimum of 10 people a week, new contacts. Come hell or high water, I would talk to 10 new people a week. And back then I'd go take a picture of the property because they didn't have this. You take a picture of the property, I'd go take a picture of 10 new properties. Then I'd take it to 1-hour photo for development. In the meantime, I go to First American Title and get the property profile sheet.
Yep.
And by the time I get that, the photos were developed. I'd come back and staple it to the paper. And then I had my 10 leads for the week right there. I do that on Monday, every Monday.
So how were you finding the properties? Are you just driving around?
Just driving. Yeah,
I was driving around.
Totally.
Were you looking for like dilapidated stuff?
Didn't matter.
Like,
I just set up by grid. I just looked at like the grid thing.
So you were just looking for any sort of multifamily,
Any multifamily
that I could hit on
2
the way to work.
units or more, didn't matter.
And then what were you doing with that stuff? Calling the owners and seeing if they wanted to sell?
100%.
Saying, hey.
Yeah. No, I would just call them, very low key. Hey, this is Jim Orcutt with Tomlinson Commercial. I do multifamily is kind of my specialty. I don't remember exactly what my script was. But then I just started asking them a couple of questions, very non-threatening, like what's your plans with your building? How's your occupancy? Can I get some information on the rent? Just some real subtle stuff. But then just leading, we also are a brokerage firm. So if you're ever considering selling, I'm the guy you want to talk to. And I just knew, again, the very first guy, his name was Bernard Langer. First guy, he said, well, I do want to talk to you. Drive out to my house right now. So, so literally that first call, I got 2 listings. So I was earning pretty good money fairly quickly from brokerage, but I was using basically all the proceeds for the most part. I've always been pretty frugal on the investment side of the ledger, so I was able to get a few good little lending relationships established at that point, just small lines of credit. I remember meeting with Shelley Manny. I don't remember Shelley, but Shelley was just starting at Sterling Savings. I called her up. I said, hey, let's meet for lunch. Told her kind of what I was doing. I said, hey, I'll start small, but I'd like to have an unsecured line of credit. Never had one. And so she gave me a $25,000 unsecured line of credit. So between the unsecured line and some of the money I'd been accruing in my account, I started to have a little bit of liquidity. And so I can remember some of the first commercial buildings I bought. Because, I'll back up a little bit. That is one thing I started to notice, too, because we're doing commercial, which we're doing a lot of multifamily. But the one thing I was starting to realize is with the commercial properties, kind of all the ongoing maintenance and upkeep was the responsibility of the tenant.
Correct. Ideally,
with the residential properties, as I'm learning, because I'm doing brokerage 5 days a week, and I'm loading up my truck on Saturday with my mower, my tools, replacing hot water tanks, all of the ongoing maintenance and upkeep on these multifamilies was primarily falling on me. And I've got a young family, and I'm going, man, how do I kind of redirect here? So I started thinking you're looking at these commercial leases that are 3 or 4 or 5 years, and or the majority of the maintenance, a lot of the capital stuff, roof structure. But I'm there's all things being equal, if the returns are comparable, I need to start buying some commercial property. So I just, again, it was kind of like one of those times, I got to just start buying some commercial property.
Yeah.
And so, again, I remember the first few that I bought. The fact that I lived up by Indian Trail, and I was kind of a northwest quadrant kid, I just started looking at stuff on Monroe or Garland or Wellesley or Ash or Hilliard, So that's really where I started cutting my teeth, buying a few little commercial properties in those neighborhoods. And I think I don't know if it was the first one, but I could give examples of stuff I bought on Monroe for $40,000 or $50,000 or $70,000 that sat on the market for a year. It wasn't you're getting some inside deal. They were literally just sitting there. So I'm feeling I got to make an offer on that. That looks like a pretty decent deal. So I 3221 North Monroe pops into my head. It was at the bottom of the hill. Strick's Donut guy owned it. Howard Strick. He owned the building next to it and the one on the corner. And he was trying to sell both of them. And I'm looking at that dirty little corner building, and it was just awful. And he wanted, I think, like $60,000 or something for it. And it had a tenant in there paying like $450 a month. He was a little auto guy. And so I offered him like, I think, $40,000. And so then I get a call from an attorney saying, hey, can you come down and meet us? So I'm downtown. Like, sure, I'll come meet you. So I sat down in the room outside the office, and Strick's in there, and the attorney comes out and he goes, there's no way you can sell it for that, but he will take 50. And I'm like, well, I go, let me think about it for a minute. And he came back out, and I said, you know what, man, I'm a young guy, I'm just getting started. You know, I think it's probably worth 50, but the most I can give you is like 43,000. And then if not, like, I'll just leave, no issue. He goes back in, he walks back out. He said he'll do it for 45. And I'm just like, I mean, then I got to go. Like, so I got up, and he's like, hey, he'll sell it for 43. So I ended up buying that building for like $43,000. And then I got rid of the car guy, and I rented it to a glass guy that was paying me like $800 a month or something. And just, so that's how I kind of started just accruing on the commercial, was just looking for some opportunities kind of in my neighborhood, stuff that I started to get real comfortable with, like values. And
so what was kind of your buy box then of what you had to fit in to do that? Was it just the deal itself? I mean, because that's the tenant. Again, was it tenant first or building first, or both?
I mean, very good question. I mean, I think what I really started feeling is like, if I buy it, I got to feel, because again, I didn't have much money, so I'm thinking like, you know, this could go one of two ways. If you get too much and things don't go well. So I just had to be comfortable that I could keep it rented and cover the expenses, the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, whatever. And so I wasn't really too consumed about immediate positive cash flow. I think I was just a little bit more concerned about that the building itself would be able to sustain itself with the tenant in there. I could get it tenanted up at $5 a foot or $6 a foot. And so, because back then, even on Monroe, man, it was like,
that was a tough little stretch for a while. Oh my gosh,
it was like Class B, maybe, secondary arterial, mom and pops just clinging month to month. So you're always like wondering, like, are they going to pay the rent? Am I going to get the rent? So, I mean, I did take on a little bit of added risk as I started accumulating a building or two each year. But I think I was pretty measured in the approach. And, you know, always was mindful of what I was paying going into it. Like the Ladder Coffee building. I just happened to run across that the other day, which is crazy. In 1986, that building sold for $150.
In 1986?
Yeah. In 1994, it sold for $150. When I bought it in 2014, what do you think it went for?
$150.
Thank you. It's just like, so there was never any appreciation as much. So you always had to go like, can I get adequate cash flow? Because there's really no off-ramp on these. If you sell them...
It had to have just sold for way overvalued in 1986, right? I mean...
probably was construction.
I don't know. Like,
it might have been construction costs at that point, right? So you just delivered a product. I mean, it's 50s product.
It's crazy to me.
I don't know.
But then you look at it, because that was my issue, was then you figure out how the game works, so you can figure out how to get into a lot of deals. And what I didn't do as good of, like, no, they're all full. And I never ran one scenario where they were all empty. And I think that's a really smart way to go look at that. I think one other crazy thing that happened was they used to call Spokane the cash flow. You'll never gain appreciation, but you'll get cash flow.
It's the grinder town, man.
Until the 5-year stretch, I jumped in it where it was appreciating at 22%. Because now you probably put that on at 900. You might even.
I don't know.
Depending on the user, right? And
I mean, it depends, but it's, but
it's
that building,
it's not gonna be 150.
That building took a ton of money and effort though to get it to where it is now. Like, it was a complete gut job. When I bought it, it was the Spokane cash register business. A guy by the name of Mike Coker owned it. There were no windows on the front on the south side. It was just all brick. Like, it was a total gut and rebuild.
I think that's another thing that always comes to my mind too, is like, I've had a few deals in my day that were just sweet deals. But people always think, well, I'd invest too, or I want a deal like that. And it's like, yeah, but I I do deals all the time, right? Like, so you're not going to stumble into one of these deals with a bunch of meat on it unless you're cranking out 150 deals, right?
No,
so
you never will.
I want that,
it's just not there, man. It's just like, to me, it's just, you find decent real estate, you have the horsepower, the liquidity to stick with it. Don't get over your skis. Younger guys, just slow and steady dude's going to win the race. But just have your antennas up. Be ready, kind of be locked and loaded. Because as I got along, I started to get a little bit more money. The line of credit started to raise up a little bit. So then I was able to take things down for cash.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you guys what you already know. So if I've got the ability to take all the risk away from the seller, like, hey, if you sign this, I know I'm kind of at the low edge of value. We can all acknowledge that. But I'm going to solve your issue. Like, I will get to the closing table in a week. And so I have bought a lot of vacant buildings. I could name off a bunch of them. But I felt like I did buy them at the low edge of value. But then I was able to kind of clean them up, re-tenant them up, then go refi them and get all my money back.
Right.
So you're into it you're into it literally for nothing, and then you're cash flowing a little bit. But then for me, the goal has always been like, I wasn't really like the guy that said, hey, I'm going to buy something, clean it up, and then resell it and try and, because I honestly did that a handful of times. And invariably, it cost me more than I thought to fix it up. Invariably, I didn't get as much as I thought when I resold it. Yeah. And then a lot of times it was short-term cap gains, so now I'm paying as normal income, and I'm going like, the brain damage and the time suck was just not worth it. So that was.
But you learned from it, though, which then makes you a savvy investor later, right?
Correct. Yeah. But what it did, Keith, it kind of put in my mind, like, because again, I think there's a bunch of different ways in real estate, but for me, it became, because my whole thing was, I just want like quality reoccurring cash flow.
Right.
And so for me, the best way is to find, solid buildings on arterials, have exposure, have access, have parking, and pay them off as quick as you can. And that's what I did. So I really tried to accelerate the buy down. It may have been on a 20-year note, but I paid it off in 12 or 13. And then, once and I've been in it for 30 years. So at the point where you start getting multiple buildings paid off, then it gets kind of exponential. It's like, and then things start, because we all know like the biggest expense on these typically is your mortgage payment. Yeah. You get rid of the mortgage, your life changes. And so, again, I think just being kind of frugal. I never commingled. Never did I ever commingle like rental income off properties into the personal income account. I always wanted to make enough commission to take care of my family. Yep. Money that's coming off cash flow, it's never going there. It's going to either buy down reserves for CapEx type stuff.
Did you ever use it to acquire more?
Yes.
That's kind of how we split ours, is that anything that comes in from a building is only used to buy a building.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a super cool way to do it. So when somebody's starting out, do you recommend they look at commercial first? Or is that kind of an acquired skill, taste, bandwidth piece? Because I think there's going to be some real opportunities
I kind of do
on
too.
the commercial side
I do too.
that I don't think are going to be on the residential side. And then the debt's about the same.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a significant gap on the debt right now. But we're looking at a office building right now that's been on for a little while, and everybody's like, "Don't do office." I'm like, but like, I can't construct that. It's double the cost to construct
Not
it.
even close,
the seller, it doesn't want it because unless you have the tenant or you're there, and so now we're just making these ridiculous offers. And I used to say ridiculous, and now I'm like, no, actually, in this market, it's
a fair offer.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a fair offer.
Right.
Well, and I think for me, it's like it doesn't matter whether you start on the residential side or the commercial side. My first conversation with people a lot of times is just like get started, right? Like I'm passionate about what real estate can do for people long-term wealth accrual wise and changing, families and livelihoods. And so it's like just get started because that's the biggest hurdles I see a lot of people just not doing it.
But one big piece I would say that we're skipping over is he also is a leasing agent. So Jim takes a building, but his expertise is tenants. And so sometimes the thing is, hey, that's a really good deal on a retail space over there.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to actually active income and investment income. Yeah. And if you are a, construction worker and you real estate invest, you make sure that you can live off your construction worker salary.
Oh, we got you. I got you. Yeah. Sarah, I get you there.
Definitely a leasing agent. So we all wear this hat where we are in the real estate industry and we real estate invest. I think there's a lot of people that it's like, it's not always going to be that way. Yeah. But they can also tell that story of like, well, of course these guys do it. They're in real estate. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, but you should do it anyway.
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, what I think I hear Jim saying is don't mix because you're in real estate and you also invest, don't mix that income with your income thinking it's the same income, which is really easy to do.
Correct.
Because you just think, oh, I'm in real estate, so all this real estate money is just potentially here for me, whether it's rental income or whether it's a flip I did or whether it's a house I sold.
Right? It's financial freedom through real estate revenue because it's a passive investment. I'm like, there is nothing passive about these things. Even when you think they're good, something's going to go wrong. Like I redo, when I do a remodel, I gut remodel. Like I know, I go all the way out to the street with the sewer. So it's all new, and there's still stuff that goes wrong.
For sure.
Well, there's that trendy little phrase that came out years ago of like, well, the Burr model. Remember the Burr model?
Yep.
And I used to just call it real estate investing, but now they came out with like an acronym, but it was buy, renovate, rent, refinance. Right? That's what Burr stood for.
Okay.
And the problem is you can read a book or go to a seminar, and I went to all of them, man. I went to like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I went to like Carnegie. I went to all of them, right? But you hear these models and you hear these and you're like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. And then the problem is, though, it's like, well, how many of those can you screw up before an investment's bad, right? So the Burr, so B. So first is like you got to buy it right, right? And they'll all tell you that. So the money's in the buy, right? You got to buy it right. But you can buy something, you think you bought it right, and then 6 months later be like, man, I shouldn't have paid that much for that, or I didn't know the market was going to shift, or I didn't know, right? So, but then it's like, okay, then there's the renovate, right? Well, it's the same thing. It's like, well, how many times does that go over budget or take longer than you think? And then there's the rent, right? Well, then it's like, well, okay, well, if it takes longer to rent, or if I don't get the rent that I think, or whatever. And then there's the refinance. Like, well, what if I can't refinance the damn thing? Because
what if rates are up?
So you start looking at these, and you're like, I can go to the seminar. It all makes sense. I get it. And now I have this perfect plan. And then the problem is you go do it and it's like, well, I screwed up B. Yep. The renovation went okay. Right. The rent wasn't what I thought. Right. And I can't refinance the damn thing. And it's like, the model works, check. But you screwed up exactly. And that I think is where that's the school of hard knocks in real estate investing is it's not that you don't get the concept. It's not that it's that each one of these things has risk tied to it and it has experience tied to it. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's real easy to screw one or two of them up. And you probably can get away with screwing one up or maybe two. But pretty soon, if you got 3 out of the 4 or even 2 out of the 4 screwed up bad enough, you're in a bad spot. And I think that's the maybe that's the next conversation I'd pick your brain about. It's like it's way harder to get out of these than it is to get into them.
I agree.
I mean, good point. You can get in a great deal today in 3 hours. You can get in a shitty deal today in 3 hours. You can try like hell to get out of a deal for 1.5 years. Right? Like there's certain things where it's like, and that's one of the lessons I've learned in my investment career is just like how long a bad deal can plague you. Or how many other more deals you got to do right to pay, make up for them. I got to do, if I do 20 deals in a year, screwing up one of them could negate the other 19.
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Or make it to where it's like, okay, I screwed up one bad enough that ate the profits off, 6 of them, 3 of them broke even, and now I'm like, well, I could have just waited and done 3 good ones because at the end of the day, I did 20, but I got the same damn money as I would have if I just done 3 good ones. Now, caveat,
great point.
You also don't get all that experience, right? So it's like talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I'm curious, Jim, is like, do you have an ugly one? Like, do you have any bad ones?
Well, honestly, not really. I mean, again, when I started, I did a handful of single-family residential flips that I bought at the steps of the courthouse. Like, oh, God, this is so cheap. This is great. Which, can you walk through those, Jordan, before you buy them?
You cannot.
No.
They call it sight unseen.
You can look in the windows if you're lucky. Or maybe there's a door unlocked. So
you may or may not break into them.
So really quickly. I would say there's been a handful of properties that took a longer time to kind of to smooth out the wrinkles. But I've never really been like the sell guy. Like I'm just kind of buy and hold. I just buy and hold. With the exception of a few. Like I got into a few with the I mean, again, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but like just what I paid, what I put in, how much I got out. I really thought like I knew what I was doing, and I did not make nearly what I thought I was going to make. And I'd have to look back. I think some of those, I broke even, or I may have lost some money. I'm not sure. But I think the real estate thing. There's different appetites for different aspects of the thing, but going back to the question, if a new person that's kind of getting started or whatever. I mean, you better be mentally tough, number one, because real estate is not easy, and it is a business. It's not like, I can be like the postmaster at the post office and reinvest and go over here and do my real estate stuff. I'm doing another job, but I'm in real estate. Yep. But the guys I've seen that do that are very handy with the tools. They know what's up. They're tough mentally, because there is going to be, and I don't know if I can say this or not, but the bullshit factor in real estate, there is some. It's not always just this smooth linear line that keeps going up. So you're going to have to be willing to take the good with the bad. Mm-hmm. So you better be prepared for that. And then I think there's just, again, finding the good mentor, the guy that you can kind of, take a look at, how did this guy do it, and try and get as much information as you can from them. Yeah. Which I've had, a lot of people ask me, and I've very willing to tell them the mistakes I've made, what's worked, what's not worked. But yeah, I just feel like, the buy and hold pattern for me has worked out well. That was kind of my mindset. I did write down a couple of things when I started. I remember when I first started figuring it out, I'm like, I'm going to buy at least one property a year. And then my goal is to add at least $1,000 in monthly net income a year. Wow. So by the time I'm 20 years into this, I better be making at least $20,000 a month net. Yeah. And so, the $1,000 a month initially wasn't quite there, but over 20, 25 years, the end goal is, there for sure, right? It's like, and so, but there was something like I kind of wrote down, this is what I'm aspiring to do. I got my kind of ducks in order financially, but then I was just always paying attention to like what's for sale, what's going on, reading the trustee sale stuff, driving streets. Like one of the first buildings I ever bought was at 3828 East Broad in Hilliard. Oh, I drove by it. There was a sign on it about as big as this. It just said for sale with a phone number. Yeah. And I called the guy. I still remember his name. His name was Howard Hazley. I call him on the phone. He's like, just this gruff old guy. Howard Hazley. I'm just like, yeah, I saw your sign. Kind of, what are you thinking? And he's like, yeah, I want to sell it. That's why the sign's on the property. Okay. So we just started talking. Obviously, I have my broker hat on, but I kind of got my investor hat on. It's like I'm working the Hilliard area. And he's like, he tells me the price, and I go, well, that seems like a pretty fair price. How do you want to get it? He's like, I don't really want any money. I just want somebody to make a payment to me. I want the payment. Yeah. I don't want to deal with the tenants. And I'm thinking like, I think I might be your guy.
I can do that.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. So I literally bought that building, I think, for like $5,000 down. I think I paid him like $180,000, which is what it was worth. I didn't get it for less than it was worth. And then there was 3 tenants in there. It was like a 7,200 square foot, 3-bay industrial building. It's like, it was easy. And so that one worked out really good. It was pretty easy. Tenants were in place when I bought it. It was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get antsy too. I was thinking through that because there was probably a stretch we bought, 20 buildings in a year. And they were all just kind of the same thing. You saw them, and in my mind, it was the same thing. Hold it, because I think one thing you keep saying is 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I think too many times in real estate, it's like, no, we're going to buy it, the market's going to go up 20%, and then we're going to sell it. Yeah. And I think if people go in with a long-term hold, it makes sense. But then what you get is this like deal bias, or the money burning a hole in your pocket, and you stretch a number that maybe wasn't there. Hey, rents are $1,200, but this one's a little different. We can get $1,450. And I feel like sometimes that was my justification, because a lot of mine were that. And especially as you bought more, everybody's like, oh yeah, this is a great deal. We'll collect the monthly income. I probably had 6, 7 in the 3-month stretch of just owner finance. And I think that's sometimes where you can get out ahead of it. Yeah. Because and I'm an optimistic guy by nature. Sure. And I think having the mentor would be like the biggest one I'd recommend. Somebody that could like take a look at the deal. Yeah. Because how would you ever say no to that? If you could go buy right now, 5,000, 7,200, let's say it's 50, right? Yeah, and I think that too many times that gets overlooked, or you force a deal to work. Yes. Like the reason none of yours went bad is your box never changed. For 20 years, I would argue.
Well, so the key with having a great mentor is listening to them. Yeah. So that's totally the other problem is like, and we've had this conversation about having like your own review board. But yeah, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times, and I owned a residential real estate brokerage, and I was an investor, so a lot of my agents became investors. But I can't even tell you the amount of times people showed me deals, and I was like, no, and they go buy it anyway. Yeah. And then I'd be like, and some of them did worked out, and I'm like, but a lot of them didn't. Yeah. I'm also like, why are you coming to me to ask me or show me this and then go in and do it in any way? It's like, well, you already sold yourself. They're excited about it. They're jacked up. And I mean, I probably did the same stuff maybe, but it's one of those things where what you're saying is find a mentor, listen to them.
It's big.
But also you have to decide what your risk threshold and what your price you're willing to pay. If you went and looked at all three of our portfolios, they're probably completely different. They have completely different strategies. But the underlying message is you have to do it. So you have to be active. You're going to take some lumps.
Big time.
You need to pay attention and be smart about what you're doing.
Amen.
But now it can look however it looks. All my houses are brick, 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms on the east side. All yours are condos. Yours are all like whatever this looks like. And so there's no perfect, I totally strategy. For me, it's like you got to do it. It's like I was just thinking this when you were talking. It's like it's kind of like a fighter when you're looking at like boxers. It's like there's some of them are very strategic about the fights they pick, right? They're like, I've been a fighter for 10 years. I take one fight a year. I make sure it's a guy I think I can beat. I want, okay, I'm 13-2, right? They're very strategic. And then you got guys that just like to fight, right? And I think for me, my strategy was this, I just like to fight. So I was just like, fucking lease option purchase on a triplex, $5,000 down, I'm in. Raw
it's the
land.
deal.
But that's how my education happened. That's how I learned. I also got smoked. I tell people all the time, I'm like, hey, I could tell you about 15 ugly ones. 15, 20 ugly. I got my ass kicked. And I also probably did 5, 10, 15 times more deals than most people. So there was the wins there too.
Totally.
But I was comfortable with that. Now, people go, hey, Keith, what would you do? I can look at someone straight in the face and be like, don't do what I did, right? And it's because of two reasons. One is you don't have to do it that way, and it can be a lot more comfortable and less risky to probably get as good or better a result. Number two is I can look at you and be like, you're not me. Like, that'll crush your soul, right? For me, I was dumb enough and thick-headed enough that I was like, I'll fight every 3 days. Right? Well, and then it's like at the end of it, people are like, he's 56 and 38, but I don't want to fight him.
But the other thing I hear in yours is what I try to do, like, because it is an alignment of goals. So yours was you want, in 20 years, you want $20,000 in net cash flow. I mean, that limits down what you want to buy, what you have to buy. Now you can't have misses because each of those need to contribute towards that. Mine was, I was like, I want to go learn how to build a skyscraper.
There you go.
And so my plan was I want to build large apartment buildings. Well, I can't buy one commercial building a year and expect to get up to the point where you can do it. And I think a lot of times we misalign that. And everybody says, go buy real estate. I don't think that's the case. Go figure out what you want.
Exactly.
Right? So if your goal is $10,000 a month, I will build you the sweetest plan with residential houses over a 15-year period to get you to 10. And I think that, speaking to it, I think that kind of discipline you have around it is something I didn't have. Well, mine was like, hey, I'm going to try this because I've never done industrial. I want to see if I like it. Hey, is that a hotel? We'll try a hotel. An old brick building? I mean, every person would be like, Jordan, stay. We've tried. And I said, but my goal is I want to go learn how to do it.
There you go.
And so it's just, I think people find an alignment with where they're at. And I've been burned on half of them, won on half of them. But my goal was that over the next 10 years, I win on all of them.
There you go.
Because now I've eliminated some of those where I don't fire from the hip anymore. I know where those parts are at. And I really believe in kind of our Spokane market with the resiliency. But I would say I would caution people to almost look at the way you approached it. Like mine was an educational where I wanted to learn.
I think Jim is the smartest guy here.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If I'm going in and I have a full-time job,
I will happily be like, I think you did it right.
100%. Then I would go in and be like, okay, my full-time job, what do I need? I need $20,000 a month. Okay, let's build a real plan. You're not going to get that in 1 year. It's not possible. Right? And I think with mine, I was optimistic enough to think, oh, it's possible to have both. And so... Well, cheers to that. It's been fun watching you work. Actually, that's how I got connected because you own all of Monroe and Garland. So every time I looked up to buy one of those things, I'm like, God, Jim again, you got that one? And then I look and like, no, you got that in like 1998. Right? And I think a lot of people overlook that slow and steady game because they like the flashier version of it. But I would caution people to go after flashy. Boring in real estate has been the ones that have won for me.
Well, and for me too, when I started I couldn't compete on division or even really Sprague. So it was kind of like I could afford kind of the Monroes, the Wellesleys, the Ash, the Garlands. So I frankly, I just kind of figured that out too. Like if I can buy a property for $87,000 or $73,000, I can afford that. And so I felt like it was a risk tolerance that I could live with. And then again, it just as it started to just kind of accumulate, then again, a little more money in the bank, a little more cash flow, then you've got the cushion then to just acquire another one. You know,
and was that like a hockey stick type growth in your mind? Because that's how I felt like it was too. Like my first house I lived in for 5 years, only real estate I owned. Well, in the 6th year we had 3. The second, I mean, and so did you kind of see that approach, or did it just kind of steadily?
Yeah, it was more steady, Jordan. I mean, I didn't really go hyper acquisition. It was more like it was a little more measured.
Yep.
I mean, there were a few years where I bought like 2 or 3 buildings, 4 buildings. I'd have to go back and look. But there were some years where I just bought one.
Yeah.
And so it was always just this is kind of what I'm looking at. I didn't really have super defined parameters, but I had a pretty good idea of what I was looking at. It was going to work in my portfolio with my mindset, with what I had, available to buy. So I think my approach was pretty measured.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, being a commercial guy, what's your take on Spokane now, from a commercial standpoint? And you could say downtown, you could say the periphery, just
yeah. Well, I mean, like our brokerage firm right now, I think we're having a pretty good year. Yeah. I mean, 2025's moving along pretty good. Our top producing guys are making a lot of money. Our mid-level guys are doing pretty good. Guys that are active in the acquisition are still active in the acquisition. Again, it's a measured approach. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody's doing any crazy speculative type stuff. Clearly the downtown thing is a big topic that needs to get addressed. Yeah. Because even me as a broker, that I do a fair amount of leasing, and in the last 2-3 years, I mean, I could name the people. I've probably had 6, 7, 8 small businesses that have relocated out of downtown. They just can't, and they're mostly women-owned businesses. Yeah. They're afraid to walk to the dumpster or walk to go get their coffee, which to me is just completely unacceptable. Yes. It's unacceptable. And then I've had a number of calls that have come in of people looking for space in Spokane that say, hey, just draw a circle around downtown. I'll look anywhere but. That's completely unacceptable. Yeah. And so I really feel like our leaders need to wake up. I mean, we just have some things that need to get addressed. But no, I think brokerage overall is, it's going pretty good. Interest rates seem to be kind of hanging in that 6 to 7 range. Cap rates, I think, are starting to creep up a little bit. But
I think Bobby Brett said something when we were talking with him, and I agreed with it. But he said it's going to fix itself. It will fix itself.
The market usually does.
In the sense of it's downtown is too valuable, and the city's too big, and too many people care about where they live. They're not going to let this go on forever.
I agree.
But we don't know if it's going to get fixed in 3 years or 5 years or 10. That's the speculative part of the unfortunate part. So there's some peace of mind in knowing it's going to fix itself.
I agree. It's too nice down there.
It'd be a hell of a lot nicer if we knew it was going to fix itself soonish,
by this November.
Yeah, exactly.
At least if someone was working, I think that's the probably the most disheartening part is not that you don't. There's some comfort in knowing it'll fix itself. I think it's a little bit better than it used to be honest. We've had that figured out. But at the same time, the most disheartening part is they don't seem to be doing anything about it very quickly or very purposefully.
I agree.
And I'm that would be at least a light at the end of the tunnel if you could kind of just show people that, hey, we see it. Yep. It's not where we want it to be. We're going to fix it. It's going to take some time. Here's a plan, or here's what we're doing. Yep. The frustrating part is where everyone's we all see it. No one's doing shit about it, and it's well,
it's frustrating.
Could you stop talking about it and do something about it, right?
That's how I feel. I've been to quite a few cities in the last 2 or 3 years, and some in blue states, most in red states, and I have seen nothing like Spokane. Yeah. You're just going this is not normal.
Well, it's actually kind of it's an anomaly, right? Spokane is the type of kind of small conservative-ish town that you wouldn't think would have this problem.
Correct.
And yet it has this sort of Portland, Seattle-ish type problem, and yet it's not that town. And then you go to these other towns that are similar, but they don't have the problem.
Correct.
And then you go to the other town that have the problem, you're well, that makes sense. Yeah. Spokane, you come here this doesn't make sense.
It shouldn't be happening. Yeah.
This is just weird. It's so that's obviously we talk about this a fair amount, and so it's one of those things where going back to what Bobby said, I think it will fix itself. But on your overall outlook, though, I guess, of Spokane, with that kind of notion of it'll probably fix itself in town. How bullish are you on downtown at all?
On downtown, I'm cautiously optimistic. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really feel until we get and I mean, I hate, I don't want to really step too far into the political arena until we just get a leadership that really is going to hold people accountable for their behavior. I'm just not sure that, we do a lot of talking, a lot of emails are going back and forth. People are like, up in arms. But ultimately, our city is frankly run by the mayor and the city council for the most part. We have a lot of concerned individuals that are trying to do stuff, but ultimately they set policy, they allocate the funds, like this is what's going on. So, I mean, I love Spokane. Like, I was raised here. I love our downtown. I love the river. I love Riverfront Park. We've got so many positive things here.
Which is also a congruent message that we get a lot, right? It's exactly what Bobby said. It's exactly what people are like, dude, it is beautiful here.
I mean,
our rivers are beautiful. Our parks are beautiful.
It's beautiful, man. My wife took me out to dinner for Father's Day at Clinker Daggers.
Yeah.
We got the seat furthest out.
Yep.
And I'm just looking down the river and looking up the river, and you're going like, does it get any better than this?
No, it's amazing.
Probably not.
No.
Like, the river just sounds good. It smells good. The view's great. You're going, man, we live in this great city. The arena, the podium, the new football field, the new stadium. Yeah. We've got all these wonderful facilities. So we've got everything here. It's just right here. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like we just got to get some leadership that basically enough is enough. Yeah. Like, we're going to take care of this once and for all. And so, but no, to answer your question, I feel bullish on Spokane. I feel, I work downtown, so I'm down there every day. So sometimes it's easy to get a little bit negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I try and keep it positive because, again, I just think there's a lot of really good stuff to look at. The buildings look good, everything. Like, we just got to get after it here a little bit, clean it up.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing about it is if you, I mean, the building we're sitting in is not far from downtown. Jordan has real estate downtown. Also, if you come down here often enough, you also get a little used to it. And you're probably not as fearful of it. Like, you talk to people or you're like, these guys are just, whatever. But I think if you're not used to coming downtown, which the bulk share of Spokanites do not come downtown all the time. Correct. So when they come down, that fear level or that kind of, I don't know, you say disgust or shock is different because you're like, to me, I'm like, those guys are there all the time or whatever, but you kind of dismiss it. And I can look past that and see the beauty.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think for some other people, that is so distracting that now all these things you were talking about, which are, I think, way overshadow the bad, it's hard to see them because you're just like, this is shocking. And actually, my wife is probably the first one that woke my eyes up to it in the sense of, I said something to the effect at a dinner party with her. I was like, that's not that bad, like blah, blah, safety wise. And she looked at me, she's like, you are a full grown adult man. Yeah. And you have to think through the eyes of me or your daughter or something. And that was kind of a shift for me to go, like, am I scared to walk downtown and grab a burrito and a beer? No. But my wife probably is.
Yeah.
It is intimidating.
It's intimidating.
As a woman, for sure.
For sure.
Totally,
or even, an elderly person or something. And I was like, I kind of got to take my, my 40-year-old gym dude hat off and be like, it's not that bad. What are you guys talking about? Right. She's like, for 75% of most people, this is very intimidating or scary or not welcoming. It's like,
Well, especially if you don't have to. Right? That's the issue. If you can divert and go to the Spokane Valley Mall.
I go up to Wander, go to Twigs or whatever, man.
Go up to Monroe or go up to Garland.
Yeah, I think, to your point, I think it'll come back. There's not really a plan. That makes it really difficult.
Well, somebody's got to, I don't want to say want to be the bad guy, and that's not the right term.
A little bit.
But this story is as old as, Hollywood, right? Like, the Wyatt Earp coming in and cleaning up tombs. Like, they found a guy who was like, we got a good town here, but we just need somebody to tell people to stop shooting each other. Would you do it? And he was kind of begrudgingly like, all right, I'll go over there and tell him to knock it off. But somebody's got to want to do it. And the problem with the politics and the policies, in my opinion, is that's not necessarily rewarded. Yeah. So a lot of these people are looking at the re-election campaign. Actually. Right. So they're trying their own livelihood, maybe as you would look at it, or their own re-election campaign is in direct competition with doing the right thing of cleaning up downtown. So it's like, well, if I'm the bad guy or the enforcer, I don't get to come back. Yeah. Until somebody, the town itself, rewards somebody who says, no, this is the behavior we want, we'll actually re-elect you or you get to come back. Yeah. If you do these things, no one's going to do it. And so that's the problem is it's like we sit here frustrated, but it's also this, their self-preservation of their political career is in direct opposition to cleaning up the town that needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah. Well, and one of the hard things I think people think it's just that problem. So you say, hey, it's just downtown. At least that's where it's at. But what they don't understand is a lot of our taxable revenue actually comes from downtown.
Yeah.
So now they're going to go issue the new assessed values for my buildings downtown.
Yes.
I'm going to contest every single one of them,
Yes.
and that's going to drop property tax revenue. The next one is every business that moved out. We just lost sales tax revenue.
Correct.
Every time the tourist event doesn't book here, we just lost revenue. And what people don't understand is if you let the problem go on that long, we are now going to have to increase taxes. So what happened to every single family residence?
Yes.
Taxes went up 10%.
Yep.
Guess what they're going to do next time because business tax revenue went down? They're going to go up 10%.
Correct.
The only way to fix this gap is to increase and pay. So even if you think it's a downtown problem, it's not.
It affects
everyone. And I think
sure.
it took me a while to fully understand that piece of it because I mean, we pay a lot of taxes.
Yep.
We pay a lot of Avista bills. We pay a lot of bills. And
Exactly.
and you don't realize it. Now all of a sudden I look at it and you take I think the tax bill is $98,000 a year on Peyton.
Jeez.
I'll contest that thing down and we might be half
That. Yeah.
because of the new building that sold.
And that's huge. And you multiply that by 10 or 20.
And that's just my one of the
totally.
buildings, right?
I mean, that's a huge number.
Yeah.
Well, it's the conversation that I love having was like, my properties have increased in value and my rents have gone up.
Yeah.
My cash flow has not changed
Right.
net because it gets eaten by Avista, it gets eaten by the city utilities, and it gets eaten by the taxes.
No doubt.
So I had a place that used to rent for $800 a month, and my payment was $600 a month. Now it rents for $1,200. So people are like, you got to be crushing it now, right? It's renting for double what your payment is. Yeah, except for like the utility bills are double.
Correct.
My property taxes are double.
Correct.
My insurance is double,
Correct.
right? So
And
it's
if you,
like,
and if you hired a plumber lately or an electrician or had a new roof put on, it's double.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to be $85 an hour. Now they're $150 an hour. Like, it's just the way it is. So to your point,
Yeah,
I
one
could
of
see a
those.
version where residential goes like a triple net commercial lease. Like I
Yeah,
could see
you
a
could
point
potentially.
like where it's
Yeah.
like the landlord can't take on that cost.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see, but the downside is that just hurts the people we're trying
It
to help.
does.
And this is it's
does.
this cycle where it may be one everybody thinks is an isolated problem, but I think it needs addressed because it's going to just continue to ripple through those pieces.
No, and the triple nets on commercial leases now are becoming a very contentious.
Very contentious.
Because it used to be, $4, $5, $6 a foot. In some cases, like 12, 13, 14, $15 a foot.
Yeah.
And tenants are just like, I can't do this.
well, and in some scenarios, they're damn near as much as the rent.
Correct. In
Right?
some cases,
They're
they are.
more.
as much
Oh, you
as
can
the
rent this little spot for $1,500, small business, and your triple nets are $1,200,
Correct.
right?
That is a fact.
But it's a
it's-
real scenario.
Yeah.
It is a real scenario.
And
It's an issue.
And what's really hard about that is then it drives values down again because your
Correct.
rental rate has to go down to account for this expense rate on the other side. And so it's the real estate's its own piece, right? Butting up against it. But what's another area of Spokane you're excited about? We always talk about downtown. I know you're Garland, Monroe.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think all of those places that got, is good examples of the, public investment, private coming back through, like
East
Hilliard,
Sprague,
north of Wellesley.
Yeah.
Sprague, clearly.
Yeah.
I talked to, I forget his last name, but Jesse, who runs the Northeast PDA up there. He's in an office up there on Market Street. So, I mean, I feel like all those neighborhoods have really benefited significantly. Even the road diet on Monroe, that was, a big issue. And a lot of the business owners there, it was a tough one because I could kind of see both sides on that one. But that was a great example of the public investment and then the private investment follows almost immediately. Money's just flowing in, redoing storefronts and, new glass and new this and new parking lots and new landscaping, new paint.
It looks beautiful.
Just
It
even
looks
like
great.
a paint job, right? I mean, I was just like, literally just paint the building and it just looks completely different. And so, I feel like those little neighborhood business districts where the barriers to entry, they're really hard. There's really no land. You might be able to get something put together like Millennium has done and like some of the stuff you've done, but like getting into those is just getting tougher and tougher. And I think because, again, back to downtown, a lot of people are migrating out of there. Again, the Garland district has definitely been the beneficiary of what's going on downtown. Same with Monroe Street. Like, I mean, I have confidentiality things in the leases, so I'm not going to say who, but I mean, I just did a lease on Monroe for 2,800 square feet with a great tenant that moved out of downtown. And so just a great tenant. And so no, I feel bullish on, those little areas where they're, fairly close to downtown, have the amenities. I I feel like those kind of neighborhoods are good
Do you
spots to put your money
invest in any other locations
Yeah.
outside of Spokane?
No.
Oh,
Yeah. Just Spokane in general, but I'll look anywhere in Spokane. I mean, I've got stuff outside of those areas, but, and for me, it was, I've been asked a question like, well, what do you look for in investment? Well, for me, I would look at anything. I don't care if it's mini stores, retail, office, multifamily, whatever, if there's some value there.
Yeah.
That was really my mindset back in the day, maybe more so than now. Now I'm a little bit more like geographic. Where it is a little bit more important to me. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's a little bit more, again, the math of the deal. Is there some meat on the bone? Can I add some value to this? Is this a long-term buy and hold? But no, I just think overall people are still moving to Spokane. You can tell every time you drive around, just the traffic, So there's still people coming here. I think comparatively we're still somewhat affordable. When you look at just housing costs and such. The taxes, like you said, property taxes don't help. But
I always giggle about this, but I wonder someday if like when I die and hopefully I still have my portfolio, right?
Yeah.
But if I die, like my grandkids are gonna be like, Grandpa was a genius, or they're gonna be like, no, Grandpa was an idiot, but he just lived between 1980 and 2040 in like a real estate boom
like,
in the right town, right?
Why did he leave all this stuff to us? Now I got to deal with it.
Like, was he a genius or was he a moron? Like, real estate investing is kind of like that. There's booms, but it's like so is oil, right? Like you can get into the oil industry and go broke. You can get into the oil industry and go rich, and it could just be the decade you were in the oil industry.
Oh, no question.
And it literally had nothing to do with your model or your
I've seen real estate guys go up in flames. Like, because again, I've seen the cycles up and down. And some of the guys that I sold stuff to, not naming names back in the day, that really got over their skis, completely imploded and never recovered. Don't even, I know their names, nobody else does. But I remember one guy that I sold about a dozen apartment buildings to in a very short period of time. He had all of his financing. He was doing 80/20s and private investors. And so a lot of these deals, he was literally 100% financed. But he was getting his down payment. But he had, he's rolling around a nice car. He's like, I'm going to be the next Donald Trump of Spokane. And so, I brokered those. I got my picture in the paper. Like, hey, look at Orcutt did all these deals, brokering this and that. But then about 2 years later, I'm getting the phone calls from him, the lenders. Hey, these are all coming back to the banks. And so, again, there's different ways to skin a cat, clearly. But I think unless you've got a ton of money, a ton of, liquidity or whatever, I just think, just kind of that measured approach, slow and steady kind of wins the race. I think if you have 5 properties that are really effectively managed and free and clear versus 10 or 15 that you're living on the razor's edge, it's just better to have the 5. Is. It's just gonna be an easier lifestyle for you, and you're not gonna be as pressed financially. So, again, the younger guys that come into my office once in a while just ask me some questions. For a guy that's been at it for a long time, I think that's a little bit, for a lot of people, that's the way to go.
So, like, for somebody looking at a deal, how much cash flow would you look at? Like, as a minimum, do you go, hey, great location, I can get into this, minimal, or is it?
Yeah, again, very good question. I mean, when I used to buy stuff, I used to have, just the cash on cash requirement, right?
Yeah.
Like I'd want to be like 10, 15% at least cash on cash. Now I'm a little, it's similar, Jordan. I mean, I similarly still look at some stuff, and I don't necessarily have any huge cash-on-cash requirements, but like, I bought 2701 Monroe recently.
Yeah, it's a great spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know how that would 10 it up. And I didn't know if I'd be sitting there at a 7 cap, a 10 cap, a 12 cap, a 15 cap. But it's worked out. I put probably about $50,000 into it, paid $500, and it's well in the double-digit cap rate. Yeah. But when I started, I didn't know if I was going to get $7 a foot, $10 a foot, $12 a foot. I put it out at 12, and ended up close to 10. Oh. And so that turned out really good. But I didn't know, and that was a dirty dog, man. That needed a ton.
That needed a lot of work.
It needed a ton. And
are you acquiring some of those just to maintain the value of your other assets?
Yes.
Like that's what I'm looking at downtown 100%. Is acquiring like some of these buildings just to make sure my other buildings
100%
stay valuable.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
That was
because it makes sense on Monroe because there's a couple dogs on Monroe still.
Yeah, so very intuitive there. Yeah, so I have even with the Kindred building. I mean, one of the reasons I did that because it used to be that little log cabin, car lot, Checky's car lot. And it was just a dump, right? It was a dump. And so, like, do you leave it a dump, or at some point you just got to bite the bullet and take one for the team and say, okay, I'm going to build this building, and you and I have talked about it. When the smoke clears, I'll know the return, but it's not going to be that
as good
great.
as the other one.
No.
Yeah.
And so you're just going, okay, but does the new restaurant building that, in my opinion, looks pretty good, building I think looks really good, is that going to add value to the neighborhood overall? I would argue that it will.
I believe it will.
I agree.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're going, okay, I'm concentrated enough in this area. Is it worth for me to, spend too much on one deal to improve the neighborhood? I think it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking to a guy from Open Door. So Open Doors was the fund that was going around buying up single-family houses, and they were driving prices up. And I was like, why would you do that? And he goes, well, because we own the 10 other ones in the neighborhood. So sure, we overpaid by $100,000 on one, but we bumped the value of our other 10 by 100. So that 100 made us $1 million. I'm like, dang it, chestnut checkers. They're just playing the game.
All those dominoes will fall at some point, right? And I think they're falling on them now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is important that you're like, and again, I just say this for me, like, and I'm kind of emotionally like I'm a North Central kid. Garland and Monroe mean more to me than just money. Like, if I can leave an impact ultimately to kind of help, increase the quality, increase the vibe. I'm not a slumlord, so I'm going to fix it up. I mean, and there's other guys that, again, I'm not going to name it, that buy property with the intent of putting the minimum in.
Correct.
It's just all about what I can get out of them, irregardless of what it does to the neighborhood or whatever. All I care about is what I'm getting.
Correct.
And I just don't subscribe to that. So I just, I feel like, Monroe and Garland specifically, for me, like, I've kind of got a duty. Let's clean them up. Let's redo a storefront. Let's make them look good. And frankly, what I've found is if I invest a little bit of money, like the, like that RC Hobby building across from the convenience store. I don't know if you remember that when it went for sale. It was just hideous.
It was terrible.
It was terrible. So it's like, okay, do you buy this thing? But because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I buy this thing, again, I have to completely gut it. Because I'm not going to leave it the way it is. It was too bad. It was too dirty. So I'm just like, okay. So based on what I paid and what I put into it, similar to Kindred, it's not like this great return.
Yeah, but you also have that latitude now because of the portfolio you developed.
Oh, yeah,
right?
of course.
Like, you can get now into projects. And take some pride in them, spend a little extra time, a little extra money on it. But you have this portfolio supporting that ability. And that's cool. I mean, that's as there's a ethical aspect to this too, right? Or a moral aspect to this too. And I think it's, maybe not more, but I would say a little bit more on the commercial side than the residential side, right? The residential side's pretty, like, new construction is new construction. There's code, there's laws, there's rules. Like, most of the new product hitting is new construction type stuff. There are some flippers and renovators running out there, and you could talk ethics. But with commercial, there's a lot, I think, of thought that goes into not only just the new stuff, but even the renovation stuff of like the quality of product you're bringing to the market, how it's going to service the neighborhood, but little stuff like parking and amenities. Like, are you gonna spend that extra $30,000 to make those 2 parking stalls, or whatever it is? Or are you gonna make it so that there's curb? There's just a lot that goes into it. So I think
no doubt.
What I would say is you're one of the investors that I look up to with that regard, in the sense of I feel like you take some pride in your investments. Your steady, stable kind of approach has allowed you also now to do some cooler projects that a lot of people probably wouldn't do, or that you're doing for not just the financial return. The financial return will be there, but you're doing it in a way that I think is a good example for people like myself or other investors that are out there doing it. Because it is easy to get caught in that trap of like buy them cheap and dirty, get them leased up, get them cash flowing,
it's all about me.
Go to the next project.
Especially when you get the bid back.
Oh my gosh!
Like, that's the other thing. I think we were talking about. You used to be able to renovate a 2-bedroom apartment unit for like $12,000. And now I think our last one, it was needed a lot, but it was like 36.
No doubt.
And so that's the sticker shock. So it's not even sometimes that you don't want to make them look nice. It's that.
Well, now it's can you
do it?
Can you do it?
Some of it was more optional. Now it is definitely.
No, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, this was
Thanks
awesome.
for coming on the pod.
I appreciate the call. Yeah, you and I hadn't talked for a while, so it was like, there's Keith Riddle, man. I got to answer this phone call.
I was talking to him on the phone, and I was like, come on the podcast.
Let's go, man. Let's go. And you and I run into each other, and I always appreciate your time, too, because everybody knows you're up to something. So you're always up to something. So it's just like.
That's a good thing. After I'm going to start implementing the Jim Orcutt model, though.
No, it's all. No,
I can't subscribe to the Jim Orcutt model, not because it's not smarter than mine. It's because, like, for me, there's an aspect of the sexy that has to be there and the excitement, right? Like, that's part of the reason I do it.
Hey,
It'd be like if someone was like, we're going to still go to the gym, Keith, but we're just going to lift all the small weights more. I'd be like, I don't want to go.
Why are we going to the gym? Why are we going to the gym?
We're just doing legs.
Yeah, can we lift those heavy ones 3 times?
I just want to see if I can do it.
Can you do it? I don't know, but it sounds fun.
Seriously, yeah, for sure.
No, that is funny. Before that, with like Peyton building, by far probably the hardest one I've ever done, but it'll be also one of the most rewarding ones. But not good returns. I call it a legacy project because I'm like, that's what you have to call a project that doesn't make money.
You know, it's impact on the city big time.
Yeah.
I'm turning more into a gym investor, right?
Yeah.
Like,
You
like
should.
the
I think
older
naturally
and more
you
mature
should.
I get,
You
I'm
should.
like, yeah, he's probably got something going there. I don't need these problems in my life, but it's
hey, to each their own.
to each their own, exactly.
Well, and again, like everybody does it their way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Just get started.
Just
get started.
man.
Well, hey, thanks for
Thanks
your
again,
time.
Jim.
man.
Love
Thanks,
to have you
guys.
back sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. All
Appreciate it. All right, you guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.